But I also pray and hope that you'll embrace that love that God has for us on this Easter. Now you might be sitting there thinking, well, I've got some things in my life. Maybe I've done some things that I'm not that proud of. Well, welcome to the human race. Maybe I have some dirt in my life. Well, that doesn't disqualify you from God's love. In fact, the very nature of Jesus coming is that he came for those who were lost. So if you're lost, you're qualified. If you're not lost, then I guess you're not qualified. But we're all qualified because we have those things in our life. There's a story in the Bible, and I think expresses really the heart of God as good as any story in the Bible. It's the story of a woman. She was a woman that was caught in the very act of adultery. Not only would that be highly embarrassing, but also that was a capital crime. So they brought this adulterous woman to Jesus, the religious leaders, and they said to Jesus, this person who was this person of compassion and mercy, he said, what should we do with this woman? The law says to stone her. In other words, gather around her, pick up rocks, and hit her with rocks until she's dead. What a horrible way to die. So Jesus, he bent down in the ground and he began to write. Now what he wrote in the ground has been the object of speculation for 2,000 years. We don't know what he wrote in the ground. But we do know what he said when he looked up. He said that him without sin cast the first stone. I invite you to watch this video.
That, back there, that's me. I always thought God was distant. I always thought he was sitting up in heaven and he didn't care about what was going on in my life. But lately, I'm starting to realize how wrong I was. This is my story. Not that I was caught committing adultery, but I was caught in my own sin, and I felt like everyone was judging me. I was judging myself. I was ready for the worst, and I really felt like I had no hope left. And then someone invited me to church. I didn't really want to go, but I thought, well, what is it going to hurt, right? When I got there, I heard about Jesus. Someone who could reach down and rescue me. Someone who could forgive me of all my sins, even the ones I couldn't forgive myself for. You see, I didn't believe I deserved to be forgiven. I didn't believe I could be forgiven. I thought I had to walk through things alone. But then I heard that Jesus was someone who loved me more than I could imagine. And he became that someone who reached down into the dirt and the darkness of my life. He gave me hope. when I thought there was no hope left. You know what I realize now? This is what Jesus wants to do for all of us. Wherever you are, whatever mess that you found yourself in, he sees you. He loves you. And he's reaching down, ready to help you out. All you have to do is take his hand.
You know, I can imagine that the family of that adulterous woman were probably disappointed in her, that story. I can imagine that the women that she had of the husband she had that adulterous encounter with, I imagine she was greatly disappointed in that adulterous woman. Probably condemned her quite harshly. But I can also imagine that adulterous woman in that story of the Bible, I bet she was a great disappointment to herself. And I bet she condemned herself greatly. I don't believe that she started off in life as a little girl thinking, someday I want to grow up and be an adulterous woman. But I like this story. Because in this story of Jesus, Jesus says, let him without sin cast the first stone. Now the only person there without sin was Jesus. But Jesus didn't bend down to cast a stone. Jesus bent down to lift up this woman. He said, I don't condemn you. Go and sin no more. You can have a new life. Well, I believe Jesus is here today. And I believe that Jesus is stretching his hand out to us. And maybe some things in your life haven't gone the way that you want them to. That happens sometimes. Or maybe you have felt judged or condemned by other people. Maybe you feel judged and condemned by yourself. But I want to encourage you and let you know, he who is without sin, I believe he is here, the resurrected Lord, through his Spirit. And he's not here to condemn you. He is here to reach his hand down and to lift you up. I pray and I hope that you will grab his hand and allow him to lift you up. For God so loved the world. The second point, amazing truth out of this verse, is an astonishing sacrifice. We look at this rose bush. As most of you know, these blooms is not all there is to a rose bush. In fact, there are things in here that will inflict great pain. They're the thorns. And the thorns represent the pain and the suffering of Jesus Christ. In John 3:16 it says, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son. He gave his one and only Son, offering him up in sacrifice. Jesus lived on this earth for 33 years, and in that 33 years, he lived a life of immeasurable, incomprehensible love and compassion for men, women, and children. He did miracles. He healed people. He opened the deaf eyes. The deaf eyes? He opened the blind. Well, that is a miracle, huh? He did all kinds of stuff. He opened the blind eyes and the deaf ears. The lame walked. He cast out demons. But his mission was not complete until he gave himself up in sacrifice. He lived for us. He died for us. And at one level, this sacrifice was a beautiful thing. If we think of the story of God, the creator of all things, becoming a human, becoming a man, coming to earth and dying for us, what a beautiful thing. But also, it's a very ugly thing. We don't live in a world of sacrifice. I've never been to a church service where there was an animal sacrifice. If you have, please do not raise your hand. We don't want to know. But that was part of the experience of the first century world. Both Jews and Gentiles, both Jews and pagans, animal sacrifice was just part of their life, part of their religious life. Jesus gave himself up in sacrifice. And that sacrifice was by means of crucifixion. Crucifixion was an absolutely horrific thing. Crucifixion is probably one of the cruelest, if not the cruelest, forms of death that man has devised. It was a means of controlling the populace. The Romans would publicly crucify people to keep people in line. To say, this is what happens to criminals. This is what happens to rebels. This is what happens to murderers. And there probably was not a person in the ancient world that did not experience someone being crucified. There was the famous slave rebellion in Rome, headed up by Spartacus. Not the famous actor, what's his name? Kirk Douglas. But there was actually a Spartacus. He rebelled. And when they caught them, the Roman Empire crucified 5,000 slaves on the same day. Lined them in and out of Rome. People experienced crucifixion. It was a horrible, terrible thing. In fact, the first symbol of Christianity was not the cross. You might know what it was? It was a fish. Right. You see the fish on people's cars? That was the first symbol of Christianity. Most scholars believe that the cross did not become the symbol of Christianity until after crucifixion was outlawed and people no longer experienced for themselves the ghastly horror of someone being crucified. When Jesus and Paul talked about crucifying and being crucifying the flesh, the crucifixion, it was a violent thing. It was only till after people didn't experience that they adopted the cross as a symbol of Christianity. It was a violent, horrible thing.